The sun hung low in the sky, casting golden rays upon the kingdom of Isoke, nestled in the heart of the vast savanna. This land, kissed by the ancestors, was a place of abundance. The earth yielded crops in great quantities. Maize, yam, millet, and beans all grew strong and rich. The rivers flowed with crystal-clear water, and the fish, fat and plentiful, swam in abundance. In the pastures, herds of cattle grazed contentedly, their black hides gleaming under the sun, while goats and sheep bounded playfully across the hills. It was a kingdom blessed with peace, its people living in harmony with one another, united by the ancient traditions passed down through the ages. In the heart of the kingdom stood the grand palace, where King Olamide ruled. A wise ruler, he held the respect of his people, and his decisions were always guided by the counsel of the elders. They were the keepers of tradition, the wisdom of the ages flowing through their veins like the sacred rivers that ran through the kingdom. However, beneath the surface of prosperity, there was a whisper, a murmur of concern that had begun to spread quietly through the kingdom. Some feared that the blessings of the land might not be as innocent as they seemed. The people, though peaceful, began to feel a tension in the air, as if the land's abundance was hiding something darker beneath it. Amara walked through the village, her presence commanding attention without her speaking a word. The villagers, young and old, turned their heads to watch her, offering silent prayers of gratitude for her. She was known throughout the kingdom as the Blessed Woman. Her beauty was like the morning sun, and her wisdom as deep as the ancient trees that stood tall by the riverbanks. It was said that she could heal the sick with a mere touch, that her voice could bring peace between the warring tribes of the land, and that her prayers made the crops grow taller and stronger. Everywhere she went, people greeted her with reverence. Her name was on the lips of all who lived in Isoke, from the richest merchant to the poorest farmer. Even travelers from faraway lands came to seek her blessings, believing that she was a living testament to the favor of the ancestors. But not all eyes looked upon Amara with admiration. The elders of the kingdom, though they respected her, could not shake the feeling that her growing influence was too great. They sat in their sacred council under the great baobab tree, their wrinkled faces grim as they spoke in hushed tones. She heals the sick, she calms the troubled hearts, and yet, there is something unnatural about her powers, said Elder Ireti, his voice heavy with concern. Another elder, the wise and elderly Adama, nodded slowly. The gifts she brings are beyond human understanding. But we must remember, there is always a price for power. We must ask ourselves, what is the cost of her gifts? Are they truly from the ancestors, or have they come from a darker force? Bihi, council fell silent as they pondered the question. The whispers among the people had reached their ears, fears that Amara's powers were tied to a dangerous secret, one that had the potential to destroy the kingdom she loved. Meanwhile, King Olamide stood alone on the balcony of his palace, gazing out at the vast fields of crops stretching out before him. His heart was torn between admiration for Amara and the weight of his duty as king. He had watched the land prosper under her influence, but he had also felt a growing unease. A king's duty was not only to maintain peace and prosperity, but to protect the kingdom from any harm, even if it came from within. To what end will her power go? He muttered to himself, his voice carried away by the wind. If she is the blessing the people say, why do I feel this storm brewing within my heart? He summoned the elders to his chamber, knowing that it was time to seek their counsel. They were the guardians of the kingdom's traditions, the ones who understood the ways of the ancestors. Their wisdom was his guide, and he trusted them with the most difficult decisions. In the gathering hall, the elders, draped in their ceremonial robes, sat in a circle. King Olamide stood before them, his hands clasped in front of him, his eyes filled with uncertainty. "My elders," he began, his voice steady yet laced with concern. "The kingdom is at peace. Amara's blessings have brought us prosperity, but I fear that prosperity may come at a greater cost than we understand. The people speak of her with reverence, but there is a growing unease. Her power is unlike any we have seen before. Elder Adama spoke first. The power she wields may indeed be a gift from the ancestors. But power, O king, is a river that can either nourish the land or flood it with destruction. We must be careful. If she is the one chosen to bring us blessings, we must understand what she has given in return. Another elder, Ireti, spoke in a low voice. The balance of the kingdom rests upon the wisdom of our ancestors, and we cannot allow one person to tip that scale. We must be cautious. If her power is not of the ancestors' will, we must find a way to stop it before it consumes us. King Olumide nodded gravely, feeling the weight of their words. I understand. But how do we find the truth? How do we uncover what lies hidden beneath her gifts? There was a long silence before Adama spoke again, his voice heavy with the weight of age and experience. The truth, O king, will reveal itself when the time is right. It always does. But you must be prepared for the storm that comes with it. And so, the storm began to brew in the kingdom of Isoke. Beneath the surface of prosperity, the seeds of doubt and fear began to take root. The elders grew more restless, and the people, once united in their adoration of Amara, began to question the true source of her power. Was she the chosen one, or was she a pawn in a game far beyond their understanding? As the kingdom stood on the precipice of change, Amara remained unaware of the turmoil swirling around her. She continued to walk through the village, healing the sick, calming the troubled, and blessing the crops. But in the hearts of the elders and some of the people, a question remained. What was the cost of the blessings she brought? In the kingdom of Isoke, the calm before the storm was all too clear. The land of Isoke, once blessed and flourishing, had begun to show signs of decay. The crops that once grew tall and strong, bursting with life under the sun, began to wither. The maize, once golden and ripe, now hung limp from their stalks. The yam vines, which had once stretched toward the heavens, now crumbled into dry earth. The rivers, which had flowed like veins through the kingdom, their waters clear and refreshing, now trickled weakly, their once mighty currents reduced to a dry whisper. It was as if the very soul of Isoke had grown tired. In the villages, an unsettling sickness spread. It began with the animals, the cattle and goats falling ill, their bodies weakening as if the earth itself had turned against them. The sickness then moved to the people, both young and old, coughing and feverish, their eyes filled with confusion and fear. The healers worked tirelessly, but nothing seemed to help. And through it all, the wind whispered through the trees. An unsettling sound, as if the land itself was speaking, but no one could understand its words. Could it be Amara? A voice was heard whispering one evening as the shadows grew long. The blessing she brought to this land, has the curse of her gift come to claim us? The rumors began to spread like wildfire, igniting the fears that had always lurked in the hearts of some. Once, Amara had been the shining star of Isoke, her gifts seen as divine. But now, in the face of suffering, people began to question whether the power that had brought prosperity had turned into a curse. The elders gathered in secret, their hearts heavy with worry. They could feel the weight of the land's sorrow pressing against their hearts. Is it the land punishing us? Elder Ireti asked in a low voice, his brow furrowed with concern. Or is it Amara's gift, or curse, turning against us? We must understand, Elder Adama spoke, his voice carrying the wisdom of generations. The spirits are not to be taken lightly. We must seek the truth, or we will lose the very balance of the kingdom. Meanwhile, in the heart of the kingdom, Amara, the blessed woman, found herself retreating from the world. She had always been a beacon of light, her presence a comfort to those in need. But now, as the land suffered, so too did she. The weight of her gifts, the ones she had once embraced so fully, now felt like chains around her soul. She could not escape the growing darkness within her heart. Imara wandered through the palace gardens, her hands trailing along the withering leaves of the once thriving plants. Her heart was heavy, burdened by a secret that she had kept for so long. The people adored her, worshipped her, but she knew something they did not, something that tied her to the very fate of Isoke. Her thoughts drifted to her childhood. The memory was clear yet painful. She had been a child abandoned by her parents, cast aside by her village because of the curse that marked her birth. The elders had called her Child of the Spirit, and the villagers whispered her name with fear. Her true family was lost to her, and so she had been taken in by a strange old woman, an ancient spirit who knew the secrets of the earth. Amara, the spirit woman, had once whispered to her, her voice a soft echo of the winds. "You have a gift, a great and terrible gift. The land will flourish, but at a cost. A price must always be paid." Amara had never forgotten the words of the spirit woman, and as the kingdom's suffering deepened, those words now haunted her every step. The gift she carried, the power that had once been a blessing, had come at a price that even now she could not escape. In the midst of her sorrow, a familiar face appeared, Tunde. He had been a young boy when he last saw Amara, and he had once looked upon her with admiration. Now, as an adult, Tunde had returned to Isoke, drawn by the whispers of her powers. But when he looked at Amara, it was not with reverence, it was with something darker. "I know the truth, Amara," Tunde said, his voice steady but heavy with accusation. "I know the secret you've hidden. I know the pact your ancestors made with the spirit in the earth, the price that must be paid." Amara's heart froze. She looked at him, eyes wide with disbelief. "Tunde, how do you know this? The spirit woman?" "I never spoke of it." Tunde's face darkened. "I learned it from the elders, from the stories of our ancestors. The prosperity of this land, the blessings it brings, are bound to a terrible price. The spirit demanded a sacrifice, and every generation must pay it. A firstborn, a child." Amara's breath caught in her throat. The words of the spirit woman echoed in her mind. A sacrifice must be made. Tunde's words sank deep into her heart like a spear. Her ancestors had sealed their fate long ago, and now she was the one who would have to carry the weight of their decision. The curse that had been passed down through the generations was now hers to bear. As the truth began to spread, a ripple of fear passed through the kingdom. The elders, once loyal to Amara, now faced a great dilemma. They convened, torn between the prosperity the kingdom had enjoyed and the terrible price that must be paid. Some saw Amara as a savior, a symbol of hope, while others viewed her with growing suspicion, believing that the land's suffering was her fault. The people, who had once revered Amara as the Blessed One, now looked at her with uncertainty. The faith they had placed in her faltered, and a divide began to grow within Isoke. "What are we to do?" Elder Iredi asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. "Do we continue to honor the blessing, or do we seek the truth that could destroy us?" Amara, standing alone in the shadows, felt the weight of the entire kingdom's gaze upon her. The once united kingdom was now divided, and the storm she had been running from for so long had finally arrived. The wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the voices of the ancestors. Isoke stood at a crossroads. Would the people embrace the truth and face the consequences of the curse, or would they turn away from it, choosing to live in ignorance and hope for salvation? Amara knew the time for silence was over. She would have to choose. The storm was coming, and only the truth could stop it. but to reveal it meant risking everything. The future of the kingdom rested in her hands, and the burden of truth lay heavy on her heart. In the silence of the night, Amara stood at the crossroads, torn between loyalty to her people and the weight of a legacy that threatened to consume them all. Amara stood at the edge of the village, her gaze lost in the distance. The wind, once warm and kind, now carried a chill that whispered through the trees like the voices of ancestors long gone. Her heart, heavy with a burden only she could understand, thudded in her chest. The child she had hidden from the world, the one she loved more than her own life, was the key to the curse that held Isoki captive. Her hands trembled as she pressed them against her chest, feeling the rhythmic beat of the little heart within her. She had sworn to protect her firstborn from the world's cruelty, but now that very child might be the cause of the kingdom's salvation, or its ultimate destruction. "I have been blind," she whispered to the wind, her voice cracking like dry earth. "What price is too high when the kingdom is falling apart? How can I save them without losing everything?" The whispers of her ancestors echoed in her mind, their voices like distant thunder rolling across the plains. The pact they had made, the terrible bargain, had never been meant for one woman alone. Yet here she was, standing at the crossroads, where every step seemed to lead to a chasm too deep to cross. The kingdom's prosperity had been built on the sacrifice of her bloodline, but now the price of that gift was too much to bear. She turned towards the village, the cries of the suffering people floating on the wind, piercing her soul. The river had dried up, and the crops withered in the fields. Was it her fault? Was this the price of her gift? A gift that had turned into a curse? "No," she murmured. "It is not just me. It is my ancestors, my blood." Her mind raced, memories flooding her thoughts. The old spirit woman's words came back to her with a painful clarity. "The pact is yours to keep, Amara. You must bear the weight of it for your people's sake. But beware, your child will be the key, the price to pay." The burden felt unbearable. Her child was both her joy and her doom. The choice, however, was not hers alone to make. It was the kingdom's, and the price was too high for even a mother's love to defy. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps reached her ears, and she turned to see Kemi, her trusted friend and the kingdom's priestess, walking toward her with a solemn expression. Kemi had long suspected the truth, and now her eyes mirrored the same sorrow that clouded Amara's heart. "Amara," Kemi said softly, stopping just before her. "The time has come. The people are losing hope. The famine, the disease, they are signs of the pact being broken. You know what must be done." Amara's eyes filled with tears as she looked at Kemi, her friend, her sister in spirit. "But my child, Kemi," she whispered, her voice full of anguish, "how can I sacrifice my own flesh and blood? The love I feel for him. It binds me in ways I cannot explain." Kemi's face hardened, but there was no malice in her gaze, only a deep understanding. "I know your pain, Amara. I, too, have seen the suffering. The people are calling for something, someone, to end the torment. The curse that haunts this land is bound to the blood of your child. If you do not act, the kingdom will be lost." Amara's heart felt like it was being torn in two. She could hear the cries of the suffering villagers, the anguish in their voices, and yet her mother's heart refused to let go of the one thing that mattered most, her son. "But Kemi," Amara whispered, "how can I sever the bond of motherhood? How can I make such a choice?" Kemi stepped closer, her voice firm and unyielding. "Amara, you are the chosen one. The pact demands a life, and your child was born into that destiny. It is not your fault. The land has been fed by this curse for generations. Now it is time to end it. Let your love for the people be greater than the love you feel for your child. This is the way forward." Amara felt the weight of Kemi's words settle in her chest, like a stone pressing down on her heart. She turned away, unable to face her friend any longer. She could not bear it. Not yet. In the distance, the fires from the fields could be seen, smoke rising into the air. The people were restless, and the kingdom's misery had reached a boiling point. Amara knew that time was running out. Her mind was a whirlwind caught between two impossible choices. To protect her son, to shield him from the world, meant the destruction of Isoke. But to sacrifice him, to give up the one thing she loved above all else, meant a future without the child who was her joy, her hope. With trembling hands, Amara touched the scar on her chest, a mark left by the spirit woman's teachings. It burned, reminding her of the bloodline she had inherited, of the promise made long ago. She closed her eyes, trying to find the strength within herself, but all she felt was a deep, overwhelming emptiness. Then the wind shifted, and Amara knew what she had to do. The next day, the people gathered in the heart of the village, their faces twisted with fear, their eyes full of uncertainty. Amara stood before them, her back straight, but her heart breaking with every breath she took. "I have come to speak of the truth," she began, her voice trembling with emotion. "The kingdom's suffering is not a curse. It is a consequence of a pact made long ago, a pact that binds my bloodline to the land's prosperity." The people fell silent, their eyes wide with disbelief as Amara's confession filled the air. The truth she had kept hidden for so long was now laid bare before them, like a wound that could not be healed. "The price of our prosperity," Amara continued, her voice breaking, "was my firstborn child. Every generation, the firstborn must be sacrificed to the spirit who watches over us. This is the curse my ancestors made. It is the price we have paid for our blessings." The silence that followed was deafening. The people's faces were masks of shock, of betrayal, of disbelief. The very woman they had once worshipped, the one they had called blessed, was now the embodiment of their darkest fears. Amara's tears fell freely now, but she did not hide them. The truth had been spoken, and there was no going back. She had torn open her soul before them, offering them the only thing she had left, her broken heart. The kingdom, once united, was now fractured beyond repair. The pain in the eyes of her people spoke louder than any words ever could. The betrayal was not hers alone. It was the curse of a bloodline too long bound to a power it could not escape. As Amara turned to leave the gathered crowd, she knew that the future of Isoke was uncertain. But one thing was clear: the price of blessings had finally been revealed, and the cost would haunt them all for generations to come. The people of Isoke gathered in the village square, a place where once the sound of joyous songs filled the air, and the laughter of children echoed like a river flowing without end. Now, a heavy silence hung over the land. The crops that had flourished like golden fields of hope now lay barren, dry as the bones of the ancestors who had long ago walked this earth. The sky, once a radiant blue, now cloaked itself in dark clouds that refused to release a single drop of rain. Even the mighty trees seemed to weep, their leaves shriveled and frail. At the heart of this suffering stood Amara, her once glorious crown now a symbol of loss and shame. Her eyes, heavy with sorrow, searched the faces of her people. No longer did they look at her with love. Now, their eyes burned with anger, betrayal, and fear. "I gave you all that I could," Amara whispered, her voice barely rising above the murmurs of the crowd. "But the price was too high. The curse is not mine alone. It is a weight passed down from our ancestors, a debt that must be paid." A murmur rippled through the crowd, a chorus of disbelief. Some turned away, their faces contorted with rage. Others stood frozen, too stunned to move. Among the crowd stood the elders, their faces creased with both age and regret. They had once been the proud stewards of the kingdom, guiding their people with wisdom and strength. Now, they could only watch as the kingdom they had built crumbled before them. "The land is cursed," the chief elder Olorun said in a voice heavy with despair. "Our crops wither. The rains do not come. The very earth rejects us. How can we undo what has been set in motion?" The ground beneath them trembled, a subtle but unmistakable sign that the forces beyond their understanding were growing restless. The balance that had once kept Isoke prosperous was now shattered, and the kingdom teetered on the brink of collapse. Amara, Kimi, the priestess and Amara's closest confidant, stepped forward from the shadows. Her face, always a mask of stoic resolve, now showed signs of cracking. "I've known the truth for many moons, but I did not wish to believe it. You must understand that the kingdom is dying, not just because of the curse, but because of our refusal to face it. Your blood, your child, he is the key." Amara's heart clenched at the mention of her child, hidden away in the secrecy of her chambers. Her son was the center of her world, the only thing in this life that she loved beyond all else. But the pact, the ancient bargain made long before her birth, it demanded a sacrifice, and it was clear now that the child, her flesh and blood, was the price. Her breath caught in her throat, and for a moment she could not speak. How could she? How could she give away the one thing that meant everything to her? "My people, I have failed you," she cried, her voice breaking. "But I have done what the ancestors demanded. I never wished this curse upon you. I never wished this pain on myself. But now, the truth is here, too late perhaps for you, to forgive me." The people gathered in the square, once loyal and adoring, now murmured with rage. Some cursed her name, while others wept in sorrow, unable to comprehend the truth they were hearing. "The queen lied to us," one man shouted. "She has destroyed us." "Amara is cursed," another woman cried, shaking her fist to the sky. "The kingdom has fallen because of her." Amara stood still, her heart heavy with the weight of the kingdom's anger. Her knees wobbled, but she did not fall. She had led them to prosperity, and now she was the one to blame for their suffering. The ancient pact, forged in blood and sorrow, had bound her people to this tragic fate, and there was no escaping it now. Tunde, Amara's steadfast protector, stepped forward, trying to silence the mob with his commanding presence. But even his strength could not halt the tide of anger that surged like a flood. "Quiet!" Tunde's voice boomed. "Do not condemn her. The curse is not of her making." But his words were lost in the chaos of the crowd. They raged, they screamed, and in the heart of the turmoil, Amara knew that there would be no salvation for her. Her people had turned against her, and the darkness that had begun to creep into their lives had fully consumed them. The earth groaned beneath them, and in that moment, the elders knew that the kingdom had crossed the point of no return. The destruction of Isoke was not merely a natural disaster. It was a punishment from the spirits, a reckoning that could not be undone. And so, as the kingdom shuddered and chaos engulfed them, Amara stood alone amidst the ruins of her life, knowing that no matter how much she had given, it would never be enough to repair the damage that had been done. The curse had been set into motion long before her birth, and now it was too late to stop it. The land had spoken. The kingdom had spoken, and Amara was left with nothing but her guilt, the weight of the past, and the fading hope of redemption. The village of Isoke had fallen silent in the wake of Amara's sacrifice. The land, though slowly beginning to heal, bore the scars of greed and ignorance. The once vibrant fields, now scarred by drought and destruction, stood as a reminder of the price of unchecked power. The villagers gathered at the foot of the great baobab tree, where they once celebrated their bounty, now turned to contemplation and sorrow. An elder woman, whose face was lined with the wisdom of the ages, stood before them. "The land cries out," she said, her voice steady but heavy with grief. We have seen the truth now. Prosperity is not only wealth, it is balance, respect for the forces that govern our lives. We have taken, and we have lost. Amara, in her pain, has shown us the price of that greed. Let her story live in our hearts, for we now know that every blessing carries its own burden, and every choice has its consequences. Around the fire, the villagers sat, listening intently. They had learned that true wealth lay not in the fullness of their granaries or the riches they had once hoarded, but in the harmony between man and nature. The wind carried whispers of the past, urging them to reflect on the legacy they had inherited, a legacy that had once been built on honor and wisdom, now marred by folly. The flames crackled as another elder, a man with silver hair like the moon's glow, stood and raised his arms to the sky. "The spirits have spoken," he said, his voice carrying the weight of years. "We have faltered, but in their mercy, they have allowed us the chance to begin anew. Let us rebuild, not with greed, but with respect for the land, for the ancestors who guide us, and for the sacred bond that exists between us and the earth." The villagers, united in their grief and newfound wisdom, bowed their heads in agreement. They would rebuild, but they would do so with reverence, understanding that the power they once wielded was not a gift to be taken lightly. As the days passed, the people returned to the traditions of the elders, planting new crops with solemn prayers. They honored the spirits of the land, asking for forgiveness and seeking guidance in the rituals that had once sustained them. The elders led the people with a newfound humility, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that they had allowed the past to slip away from them. At the heart of the village, where the flames of the fire once danced in celebration, a monument was built in Amara's honor. The stone stood tall, carved with the image of a woman whose sacrifice had saved them all. Her name was whispered with reverence and sorrow, a reminder that prosperity came at a cost and that true wisdom was earned through sacrifice. The elders spoke of her often, their voices low, as they told the children of Amara's courage and the price she had paid. "Remember," they would say, "the land is alive. The spirits walk among us, watching, listening, waiting. Let her story be a warning, a memory carved in stone, that the path to power is never without its cost." As the years passed, the villagers began to heal. But the story of Amara lived on in their hearts, a story told around fires, passed from generation to generation. It was a story of sacrifice, redemption, and the weight of power. The monument to Amara stood as a silent testament to the lessons learned, a reminder of the fragile balance between life and death, power and responsibility. And in the distance, on the winds that whispered through the trees, the ancestors watched. Their eyes, unseen but ever present, observed the people of Isoke. The spirits did not sleep, for they knew that the balance of the land was delicate, and that every action, whether good or ill, was recorded in the earth beneath their feet. The villagers understood now that their prosperity was not a gift that could be taken for granted. It was earned through humility, respect, and sacrifice, and so they lived in the shadow of Amara's memory, knowing that the ancestors watched, their eyes ever vigilant. With each passing day, the people of Isoke knew that the spirits were near, reminding them that the price of prosperity was always paid in full, and that the land would never forget. The people of the kingdom spoke of Amara with reverence. They called her blessed, for she held within her hands the power to heal the sick, to calm storms, and to bless the land with abundant harvests. Her beauty was as radiant as the dawn, and her kindness flowed like the river. But what the people did not know, what no one knew, was the cost of her gifts. Amara stood alone at the edge of the great river one evening, the golden light of the setting sun dancing on the water. Her heart was heavy, her mind burdened by the weight of her own powers. She had been chosen by the spirits, entrusted with gifts that could save a kingdom, but at what cost? She could feel the pulse of the magic deep within her, like the earth, beneath her feet. It was a gift, yes, but also a curse. Every healing touch, every prayer of peace, every blessing she gave drained her. The spirits demanded balance, and that balance was paid in blood, her blood. "Why must it be this way?" she whispered, her voice barely carried by the wind. "Why must I sacrifice so much for their prosperity?" Her reflection in the water seemed to mock her, a vision of perfection, of serenity. But inside, she was torn, apart, knowing that every time she gave of herself, something of her soul was lost. The land flourished, but her heart withered. It was a trade she could not undo, and yet she could not stop. As Amara gazed across the river, she saw the kingdom, bathed in golden light, its fields ripe with crops, its people singing and dancing in the market. They did not know the truth. They did not know the price of their prosperity. They saw only the gifts, the blessings, the abundance. But Amara knew better. The tension was growing, and not just within her. The kingdom itself was becoming divided. The elders, wise but set in their ways, clung to the traditions of old. They believed that the old ways of sacrifice, the rituals and ceremonies, were the only path to peace. But there were others, young and eager for change, who saw Amara's influence as a sign that they could move beyond the past. They saw her as a beacon of progress, someone who could guide them to new heights of prosperity. "She has brought us peace," said one young man, his eyes alight with hope. "With her gifts, we can reshape the future, bring prosperity to every home, and create a kingdom that is truly great." But not all shared his enthusiasm. Elder Kofi, his face weathered by years of wisdom, stood tall, his voice steady but filled with concern. "This is not the way," he said. "The land must be respected. The old ways must be followed. We cannot forsake the spirits and the ancestors for the promise of quick riches." As the kingdom grew divided, the winds of change stirred. The people were caught between the allure of modernity and the pull of tradition, their hearts torn as Amara's influence spread like wildfire. Meanwhile, Amara felt the burden of her role becoming unbearable. She had never asked for this power. It had come to her as a gift from the spirits, but it was a gift wrapped in shadow, and soon the truth would be known. The very foundation of her blessings was built on a pact made long ago, a pact with a spirit that demanded more than anyone could understand. The kingdom's prosperity, their blessings of peace and wealth, came at a price that no one but Amara could see. As the days passed, her guilt began to eat away at her. She had hidden the truth from the people, for fear of what they might do. But now, the cost of her silence was becoming clear. The storms began to stir, the crops began to wither, and a sense of dread settled over the land. It was as though the kingdom itself had sensed the disturbance in the balance, and the consequences of her betrayal were now coming to bear. One evening, as the wind howled through the trees, Amara stood at the center of the village, her heart racing. The people were waiting for her, waiting for a miracle, for another blessing. But she knew that her power had limits, and the spirits were growing angry. "I have failed you," Amara whispered, her voice breaking. "I have failed you all." And it was then that the truth was revealed. The pact, the secret of her ancestors, came to light, shattering the trust of the kingdom. The people, who had once adored her, now looked upon her with fear and suspicion. How could they trust someone who had hidden such a dark secret from them? The kingdom was plunged into chaos as the crops failed. The rivers ran dry, and disease spread through the land. Amara's heart was torn. She loved the people of her kingdom, but she knew that her choices had led them to this point. Her path to redemption was unclear, but she knew that she must make a sacrifice. She must undo the pact, restore the balance, and face the consequences of her actions. But could she save the kingdom and herself from the destruction she had caused. As the storms raged around her, Amara knew that she would have to pay the ultimate price. The sacrifices she had made in the past had been nothing compared to what lay ahead, but it was the only way. The price of prosperity, she realized, was never free. It was always paid in blood, and now it was time to make the final sacrifice. The winds howled, the earth trembled, and Amara knew her fate was sealed. The kingdom would either rise again, or it would fall, destroyed by the very blessings it had once worshipped. The path of redemption was steep, and the burden of power was greater than she had ever imagined.